Buy shirt, get money. No, other way. We get money. You send money, we get shirt. Buy shirt, get money. No, other way. We get money. You send money, we get shirt. Buy shirt, get money. No, other way. We get money. You send money, we get shirt.
We need to roll back the
paleo strategy. John spies
on all of our
posts,
our
Facebook groups,
flooded with
alt-writers.
If you want to know who
Dave's
his next
guest
is, look at
who's owning the libs
right now. Every single one of these problems are a result of
not putting pronouns in the bio. The Fakertarians podcast. Internet.
Here's your host,
John Hudak. Hey guys, and welcome to the Fakertarians podcast. I'm your host, John Hudak, along with Jeremy Kantorowicz and one of my sock accounts. Today we have on Andy Craig, the political director of the Pragmatic Caucus. How are you doing today, Andy?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Well, thanks.
Nice. So you're fresh off a debate with Dave Smith on Lions of Liberty. It's only available to their Patreon subscribers right now, but it's going live on Monday for everyone. And how do you think that debate went? We'll get more to it later, but
Sure. I mean, well, I guess the story of how it started would be I was responding just to somebody else on Twitter about the debate over Joe Jorgensen's quote when she said libertarians should be anti-racist, quoting Jonathan Blanks in an essay he wrote. And I mentioned as an example of the broader context problem we have in the movement, and part of what that was pushing back on and aiming at, is the paleo strategy, the figures accepted within the movement who, are the alt-right pipeline, the bridge to people like Mullen, Spencer, and all that sort of gross, bigoted, far nasty alt-right stuff. And I mentioned as an example of that Dave Smith does the Soho Forum, which is sponsored by Reason. But if you look at what he said, he's had on Holocaust deniers and yucked it up and said it was hilarious. He's, called people like Molyneux and great. And this all ties back to the broader history of kind of the paleo wing of the movement and where those ideas are coming from and where they lead to. I went on, he then demanded to debate me, which I guess is how that goes. And I went on, so I said, I don't really want to go on his show, but I'll meet him on some. I asked a couple people. I honestly don't listen to very many podcasts myself, but I asked a few people,
neither.
you know, what's a good one to go on, and we did Lions of Liberty, and I, you know, said all that. I mentioned I pointed out all the quotes, all the examples of him talking to these people, and not just interviewing them, not, you know, not having a kind of journalistic disagreement or you know, back and forth, but praising and agreeing with them. And I think that's an example of a problem in the movement. And so yeah, that's pretty much what happened. We did not hide our mutual disdain for each other, to put it mildly. Um, but you know,
Yeah.
went back and forth like that for an hour. I mentioned all these examples. We touched on the mostly he was most hung up on the Holocaust denial Nick Fuentes cookie video thing that I'd mentioned. Got to race and IQ when we were talking about Molyneux. I think there might have been one or two other things like that, but that
Yeah.
was most of it.
Okay, so we're gonna go to some clips, not from that debate, because I promised the Lions of Liberty guys we wouldn't play it before it went live. But I have some clips from some of Dave's episodes to play a little later in the episode, our episode. So first, just a little bit about you. How did you get involved in libertarianism in the Libertarian Party?
Well, it goes back when I was in high school. That was around 2007, 2008 when Ron Paul was running. And, you know, I really got into it, that, and I didn't kind of reassess my evaluation of Paul until later. But then after that, you know, I went off to school, and 4 years later found out about Gary Johnson. Really liked him. Decided I liked him better than Paul. Was mad when Ron ran again in 2012. Um, but I liked Gary, and when he joined the LP, that's kind of. I mean, I had been aware of the party. I followed the 2008 convention and the whole Bob Barr Wayne Root train wreck, and so I knew a little bit about it. Um, but when Gary moved over, that's when I got involved. I went to actually the first LP meeting I went to was Jim Gray in Milwaukee in 2012. Um, and then after that, I got involved, joined the party. I ran the Milwaukee County Party for about 5 years. Um, and we did a great job growing that. I ran for Secretary of State in Wisconsin in 2014, and that was a ballot access race for us. So we hit that mark and got the presidential ticket on the ballot. So that was very nice.
Oh wow!
It was only 1%. I mean, it's not, you know, in the grand scheme of things, but it was mission accomplished. I actually ran on abolishing the office. That's a fun story we can get into.
It's a good time.
And then 2 years later in 2016, I'd kind of gotten more involved. I ran against Gwen Moore for Congress. But that was, you know, there was no Republican in the race, and that was kind of a, you know, let's put somebody on the ballot thing. Got a bit over 11% in that race against her and another independent. And then, but most of what I spent 2016 was I worked for Gary Johnson. I worked on the campaign through the nomination. I was there in Orlando at the convention. And then afterwards, what I did through the general election was largely coordinating as they came in, but in some cases kind of soliciting and feeling people out for endorsements. So the
Nice.
state legislators we got, the other endorsements we worked on trying to get, and that we did get. So that was fun. I enjoyed it. I did
Yeah.
a few other things, wrote for the campaign. And then after that, recently got a job, moved to DC, and work here kind of as a writer and tweet and rant on Facebook too much.
I get that. So earlier when you were talking about the Dave Smith thing, you kept there was the whole thing where Dave kept asking, when did I praise a Holocaust denier and all that. So I pulled some clips a few days ago. So our tech guy, can we run the Dave Smith Groyper Wars clip?
it. And to me, a lot of people asked me when the Groyper War thing was going on, people would be like, oh, like, what do you think about this? And I'd always kind of err on your guys' side. Like, I was like, I kind of love what they're doing. It's great. And then people would be like, but why? Like, why are you? Because really, I mean, I'm a libertarian. If you listen to there'd be lots of issues that you could take what Charlie Kirk's talking points are and what your, talking points are and say, I probably agree more with him than I do with you. But the essence of it was that I just believe that he is phony and that you like, I will take a real nationalist over a fake libertarian, like in this argument.
So there's one right there. That's a nice little fun one. So he's talking about when he was arguing with Charlie Kirk. And I mean, I don't think any of us here are Charlie Kirk fans, but I don't see the point of praising him there. And I mean, just to be clear for anyone watching, Fuentes is a Holocaust denier. I mean, he made that whole video where he's talking about Cookie Monster, how he couldn't bake 6 million cookies because he wouldn't have enough ovens. Like, it was a very clear analogy to the Holocaust that people have tried to play off as a joke sometimes, but Fuentes is like a full-on 14 words guy. So it's not like he's not just like some kind of comedian or something like that. Right. Andy, do you want to say something about it before I play the next one?
Oh no, I mean, I think your summary of who Fuentes is
yeah,
pretty much summed it up. Yep.
Like I have some Fuentes quotes right here. Fuentes was a Charlottesville attendee. He said about Charlottesville, he said, the rootless transnational elite knows that a tidal wave of white identity is coming. And they know that once the word gets out, they will not be able to stop us. On segregation, talking about how African Americans were treated, Fuentes said, it was better for them too. They had to drink out of a different water fountain. Big fucking deal. Oh no, they had to go to different schools. Who cares? Grow up. So this is the guy we're dealing with defending right now. I mean, he's not anything we should be playing around with. Tech guy, can you play the Dave Smith not really seeing it clip?
And I've had this experience a lot, man, like over years and years. And that's why I was even saying with this, like this Caitlin Bennett girl, like I don't know her, but all these people are telling me, oh, she's the worst person in the world. I'm like, I'm not going to judge her because I've been told so many people, you're one of them, but a whole bunch of people, oh, this guy's evil and this guy's horrible. And then I talk to him and I'm like, I don't know. I'm not really seeing it. Maybe I'm missing something and I'm just like the ignorant one. But all these people, and it's been friends of mine from Gavin McGinnis, Anthony Cumia, Owen Benjamin. I know you two had a weird thing, but Owen Benjamin's a good friend of mine. And all these people telling me like these horrible people. It's like, no, I met him. Good dad. Really nice guy. Turns out not at all what you're telling me he is.
So there's a nice little thing right there. And if you want to talk more about Dave praising Holocaust deniers, Owen Benjamin, that other guy, another guy that Dave's called great. Here's an Owen Benjamin quote for you. Really what he, meaning Hitler, was trying to do was clean Germany, clean it of the parasites, of the fleas. He did not hate Jews. He hated filth and he was trying to clean it up. That's an Owen Benjamin quote. Right. And Owen Benjamin is also denied the gas chambers. So, I mean, it's another thing right there.
Yeah. And I mean, this is the kind of thing where this is not confronting these people. This is agreeing with it. And the line he had about Charlie Kirk, and this is something that kind of ran through his point with me, is why do you have such sympathy and talk to these people like this? Was that, well, they despise kind of the woke left and the neocons, which I guess is true, but this is not better. When you're out there, when you're out there making common cause and building bridges with and praising is great, all these examples of bad ideas that are just way out in left field. What do this is I don't know other libertarians who do this kind of thing. And I don't, that's why I said this is more alt-right than libertarian. And that's why I stand by. That was the other big thing he wanted to, he went back and forth about what counts as alt-right. But if this stuff and these people are not alt-right, then the term's been defined down to meaningless and non-existent, which is
Well, he tried to say in the debate that it was.
the alt-right's done and gone, and it was really more just Hillary Clinton and the mainstream press or whatever, and the corporate.
I've heard him try to say before that Fuentes isn't alt-right because he's America first, and there's a difference. Like he's trying to draw these lines in the sand. It's total bullshit. But so Tech Guy, can we play the Dave Smith "Pretty Damn Good" clip?
Jamie, pull that up.
What hopeless on that. All right, listen, we're up against the end of time, so I want to ask you, let's run this down and let me find out how much me and you are fellow travelers. So just tell me how you feel. I'm going to throw an issue at you. You tell me if you agree with me or not. All right. End the wars.
Agree.
End the Fed.
Agree.
End the welfare state.
Agree.
You know, that's pretty goddamn good.
That's all that matters.
All that matters, apparently.
And that's the common strain of argument that they make for this is that and it's true. If you look at Fuentes or Richard Spencer or David Duke, most of these nut jobs are. And you can find policy preferences that libertarians agree with on them. You can find policy. Some of them are, more pro-welfare state. You can find these sort of superficial overlaps with just about any political ideology. But there is a fundamental first principles difference that places them outside of even the sorts of agreements we would have with kind of mainstream conservatives and progressives, which are big and consequential. But we're speaking a common language with them, and it doesn't go to the root of this denial of our first principle. It's in the Declaration of Independence as much as it's been stated anywhere else, that all are created equal, that everybody has equal rights. That's a universal individual principle that doesn't have anything to do with race or gender and this is not. Too many libertarians have been trained to hear that and think, oh, that's lefty, that's pinko commie talk. It's not. It's Jefferson. It's John Locke. These are the foundations of what we believe. And when you have people attacking that, frontally, directly attacking those foundations, Nazi might want to end the Fed. I'm not going to vote for him because he's going to end the Fed. Yeah,
it's just ridiculous. So next clip we have Tech Guy. If you can get the Dave Smith "That's Hilarious" clip up, this is where he's talking about Fuentes's Cookie Monster Holocaust video. Oh, do we not have sound on that one? Sound didn't play on that one. That guy.
Get it? So I remember people would send me, when you were going through all this shit, when they were trying to like take you down, and people would send me like they're like, look, he's a Holocaust denier. Look at this Cookie Monster clip there. And I was like, I mean, okay, that's hilarious. Like, what are we eating? Like, what? I mean,
like, I don't know why someone needs to make an excuse for something like that. Like, and what's actually kind of funny is that Dave freaked out about that joke about Rand Paul the other day, but but the Fuentes thing, that's hilarious. I don't know why anyone has a problem with that.
And I do want to address one point, he mentioned when he angrily tweeted at me, and he brought it up too, is that his, I believe, grandfather, he said, was a Holocaust survivor, which I absolutely believe. I'm not Nick Fuentes, but there's, this is, and he said to say, well, there's jokes about the Holocaust. I mean, he didn't mention it. The example that kind of came to mind is Inglorious Bastards. that there has been certainly a tradition and a cultural catharsis that comes from that sort of thing. And I'm not saying, oh, you can't ever do that or that's unacceptable. That's not what this was. This was not, this was not using humor as catharsis and empathy and to address this history in a way that has those kind of benefits. This was just straight up, the idiot saying, haha, 6 million Jews weren't really killed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not.
Yeah, this wasn't like this wasn't some kind of dark humor.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Tech guy, can you play Dave Smith Sellout next?
Charlie Kirk, after the whatever it was, the OSU
By the way,
event,
Nick, I'm one check away from just slamming you. One big check away from just going, he's a racist, and I didn't like that Cookie Monster joke. It was way out of line. Anyway, big corporate America, throw me a check. Let's get this
That's
sellout
right.
going.
I just threw that one in there because it's just him mocking the idea of people calling him racist. Like he actually did that when he went on. He's been on Molyneux's show a few times, but when he went on, I think it was 2018. The episode was called "Immigration Derangement Syndrome," and it was about Molyneux talking about how the border camps aren't that bad and stuff like that. But he went on there and he was kind of like laughing at the idea of calling Molyneux racist, and here we have him laughing at the idea of calling Fuentes racist, or laughing at the idea of his Cookie Monster joke being bad. It's just kind of like another example.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say to that's part of the word game that goes into this, like, and that's not really wasn't my point about it. Like, is Dave Smith or any of these people really, even the ones who, the ones we're talking about, Fuentes and Benjamin, are they really in their heart, do they hate people on the basis of race, or are they just, playing an act or whatever? Like, this is not about parsing their internal beliefs. I don't really care about that. It's irrelevant. It's about the things they say and do and the ideas they promote. That it has all sorts of disastrous consequences and has been the main fuel of American statism and oppression for centuries. If you look through the history of this country and what sorts of ideas and what sorts of beliefs lead to all the most horrible things government has done in American history, 9 times out of 10, it's racial and ethnic animus, or misogyny, or in some cases homophobia. These like it's not been as much as I disagree with socialists or whatever, kind of like a full-blown communists and all the rest of it. I put Social Security up against Jim Crow, and it's no contest.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so next we got a video where Dave's basically saying Holocaust denial isn't that bad. Can we play the Dave Smith hypothetically video?
Not worse than, like, let's just say hypothetically, not saying this is your view, and I'd still like to stay on YouTube for a little longer, but not that there's anyone's view, but let's say somebody didn't believe that 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, but they did. Like, let's just say that is the starting point, that 6 million Jews, to the T, not 6 million one, exactly 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, and someone says, I don't believe it. Why is that the most horrible thing ever? It's like, it's over, it's done with, I don't know what to say, it happened, but you don't really believe it happened, like, whatever. Again, not saying you, just hypothetically, some person.
So I'll note that because he's going to be like, context, like he always is. I'll note that was in the context of him saying that Ben Shapiro's worse. But just I don't know if Dave's playing dumb here or if, or what, but just the idea that it's actually about like a statistical debate instead of an entire worldview just kind of throws me.
Dane knows exactly what he's doing here.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think this is not like some quibble you discuss about the statistical methodology and all the rest of it. Absolutely. We all know what this is wrapped up in and what it represents. There's, you know, and part of what demonstrates to me how disingenuous it is he was managed to trump up the outrage at me for mentioning it. But then when, you know, how dare you say I praised Holocaust deniers and all the rest of it. But here he is talking to Holocaust deniers about Holocaust denial. And somehow none of that outrage is there, and who cares? It doesn't matter, and it can be funny. And so that's, I mean, that kind of shows how he was not able to be consistent in his opinion about it. I'll put it that way.
So we got another. Oh, did someone want to say something?
Oh no.
We got
I
another
just
fun
agreed.
one with Fuentes coming up next. It's not totally related to the debate, but I just wanted to throw this one in here. Tech guy, can you play the Dave Smith whites only signs next?
But it drives me crazy when I hear libertarians say, like, well, they're a private business, they can do whatever they want to. I mean, libertarians always talk about how, like, well, if some private business were discriminating, you know, if they hung up a whites only sign or something like that, I would be the first, you know, we would boycott and we would do all this and we would say they're horrible and all this, and then the market would sort all of it out. But here you have in real time, like, our modern day version of that, which is basically that if you want to say, like, no, if I want to refer to Caitlyn Jenner as Bruce Jenner on Twitter, I get kicked off of Twitter for doing that. And the market doesn't seem to be solving the problem. Obviously, it's not a completely free market, but at the very least, I think libertarians should be out there condemning them. Like, don't just say, hey, they're a private business, they can do whatever they want to.
Just the idea that being kicked off of Twitter for calling Caitlyn Jenner Bruce is the modern day equivalent of whites only signs. That just blows my mind.
Yeah, that one is just like, really, like,
Well,
how is that even?
I'll point out one example about this. This is a good case of this whole issue of social media and the rest of it, and where that took them, is a condemnation of the free market. I mean, that's part of the service Twitter or Facebook or whatever provides, is people don't want a totally unmoderated dumpster fire 4chan experience when they go on Facebook and Twitter. And so that is the market working. You know, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect. I think there's certainly, you can disagree with various decisions Twitter has made about where to draw the line, who gets kicked and who doesn't. And that's all very subjective. But these are companies in competition with each other. Facebook seems to be rather more permissive in some ways, but not others. Facebook will have more kind of in the political out there realm, and Twitter, you can find, you know, has porn on it. So this is the kind of thing that you can, when you go down this road of siding with these people about, you know, who got kicked off Twitter 9 times out of 10 for pretty good reasons, because they are, you know, ridiculous, bigoted hate mongers. You can't reconcile that with the fact that is market outcome. And so, you know, you have to, well, if it's a market failure, not a market outcome, where does that lead next? And of course, where they leads for a lot of them is the state has to do something about it. We need the federal government to tinker with CDA 230 or whatever. So
yeah, they actually
not removed from kind of free market libertarian principles. It undermines and cuts against those just as much as it does kind of our, you know, basic individual equality beliefs.
Right.
It's funny how much Dave focuses on the anti-white racism thing, or just comparing the Caitlyn Jenner thing to whites only signs. Like there's that quote from the other day where Dave says, I just think that there's not really a huge problem of racism, certainly amongst libertarians. You could argue there's a huge problem of racism in the country right now, but it's pretty much all coming in one direction, and it's not the one that you guys are thinking of. It's just a complete tone deafness. Like I mean, it's probably a pander thing.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe. And, you know, he was very hung up on that White Fragility book by I can't even remember the guy's name, which I've not read. I've read
I haven't either.
You know, some of what it's about, and yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of stuff in there I disagree with. But his insistent that he would never publish the black equivalent of this, and I'm like, I can think of some examples where absolutely that kind of sweeping generalization, much more harmful, not even remotely kind of the equivalent sort of disagreement. And that it's just, I don't agree with the white fragility, a lot of the thesis, but
Right.
damn if this isn't one of the best examples I can think of the title. Like, woohoo, my buddy who was tweeting hilarious, attacks on people for having interracial children got kicked off Twitter.
No, I know.
Okay.
It's just out there. You also brought up in the debate with Dave, you were talking about how Hoppe wants IQ tests for immigrants coming in, and Dave was like, "No, I'm not going to believe that." So I did a little bit of research. So if you go to page 148 of Democracy: The God That Failed, one of Hoppe's most controversial books, he talks about what someone should advocate as the relatively correct immigration policy as long as the state is still in place. And then on the next page, he says, it implies that all immigrants must demonstrate through tests not only English language proficiency, but all around superior intellectual performance and character structure, as well as a compatible system of values, with the predictable result of a systematic pro-European immigration bias. So, I mean, that's right there. He literally says tests. He says intelligence. Like, there it is, Dave.
Yeah, no, and that's Hoppe has hit a lot of stuff in that argument. Talking about IQ tests in other contexts, he talks about it as time preference, which is a real and important economic concept that you find in Austrian economics, that has to do with basically, what we would call in normal parlance, your ability for delayed gratification, and to discipline yourself towards that sort of thing. But he takes that and says, look, gays have lower time preferences and all these different,
he said that about, there was a letter he wrote in response to someone he was arguing with, and he said that he cited, I think it was Rushton, to say that blacks have lower time preference too, or higher time preference, higher, because higher is.
I always get them. I always get them confused.
Yeah,
right, and that's that's gussied up phrenology. That's the old let's pull out the measure people's skulls crap. That has nothing to do, and it isn't, like I'll just reiterate, that is an attack, like in Jeff Dice Blood and Soil speech. He goes on about how an Irishman is not a Chinese, is not an Aboriginal, is not a yada yada, and that attacks the basic fundamental premise of all individuals have rights and we are equal in that respect. So I don't know. This is a perfect example of kind of where they're coming from and why. None of this is new. This all goes back 20, 30 years, in some cases more, to Rothbard, towards the end of his life, and all that sort of stuff. And what came of it is, we see examples like the Ron Paul newsletters when that blew up. We see, Chris Cantwell, Molyneux, all these people coming out of libertarian spaces, people who were used to be thought of as and were welcomed as libertarians within our movement. And by having this whole, they're anti-establishment, let's pander to the right-wing populism, is the term Rothbard used for it. This is where it leads, and that touches on our definition of alt-right that we disputed. And he was like, well, it was a thing kind of a little bit until Charlottesville, and now it's done, and that's it. And it was grossly inflated. And they cycle through, even Richard Spencer says, oh, I'm not alt-right, I'm identitarian now. They cycle through a brand every few years. This is not the same thing. And so what I called it is illiberal right-wing populism is a good working definition of what we're talking about with these things. And, aside from the illiberal part, he didn't use that word, but that's lifted pretty much straight from Rothbard's 1992 essay, the one where he starts out with the extended homage to David Duke and says, oh, the establishment beat him in his
Finally got him.
Right, finally got him when he ran for governor of Louisiana. And this has been a problem in our movement that, that's why I felt this was worth addressing and not getting, frankly, bullied into silence about it, that we just have to look the other way and can't say anything. Because this is a cancer that's been growing on our movement for a long time, and it's done a lot of harm, and it pulls people down a ugly, hateful, ineffective, counterproductive road that does a lot to hold us. The wider world notices. Libertarianism isn't that obscure. When we have one of these people blow up in a big controversy, or they do something crazy, people notice that, hey, well, where did they get their audience and build their base over the past few years? Oh, it was on the libertarian circuit. And so that's why there's a deeper, broader context to all this that is not just, well, did he praise that one guy who's a Holocaust denier, and what exactly did he mean by this clip or the other? It really goes to a deeper, fundamental disagreement about the kind of world we're wanting to build and the movement that we have around that.
Yeah. So there's a few things I want to touch on there. From the debate, when you brought up the whole Molyneux IQ thing, Dave's defense was kind of like, well, I don't know what causes it and stuff like that. Like, he's just playing, I feel like it was a little bit of trying to like hedge the middle, like just playing dumb. Because if you look at what Molyneux's saying, like, actually, I might have some quotes right here. Let's see what we got. Mississippi is 37.8% black. Demographics is destiny. These are Molyneux quotes. Look up average Hispanic IQ, can't be helped. Country IQ, regression to the mean. Like, Molyneux isn't some like intelligence scientist trying to figure out IQ scores or something like that. And making it seem like that, like Dave did, is just disingenuous, that Molyneux is like really having some actual debate and not just pandering to the race IQ, race realism people.
And when we discussed it, he demanded, what do you disagree that there's actually IQ differences among racial groups? And I said, I insisted no. And that's not because you can't go look at these tests and find disparities, but we have explanations for that. What this is not is just as a basic scientific mainstream fact that these are not underlying intelligence or ability to be intelligent or general intelligence factors. It's a test that measures a few things, a specific kind of thought. It has very limited, narrow application in the field of psychology. And this idea that it's the master number based on, the average of people with your skin color is just, that's what this is. And this, again, is the kind of the long history of this stuff and the broader context. It's like the thing with, the Holocaust, saying only 200,000 and not 6 million were killed in the Holocaust is not just disputing some statistics. It's tied up in all this broader stuff that you have to be playing dumb to pretend not to understand.
Dijon Huda here. I just want to jump in for a moment. Just to note that I'm a real person, by the way. Dave had actually said that Molyneux's racial IQ pseudoscience was
scientific fact.
Was scientific fact and scientific reality on two separate occasions. And I just kind of find it interesting that somebody that tries to label themselves as an individualist buys into this collectivist nonsense so easily and really espouses it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. So, a little bit earlier, you talked about the whole Rothbard right-wing populism thing. And it was actually kind of ironic because I think it was the day your debate came out or maybe the day you did it. I don't remember exactly, but Dave came out with an episode about what we can learn from late Rothbard. And he was talking about, he kind of like shooed away the David Duke stuff a bit. He made like some offhand comment about how like David Duke was KKK, but then like toned things down and then got more radical again later, like trying to make it seem like David Duke was like reformed at that point, which was pretty ridiculous. And then he also, Dave has that quote from a week ago or so where he said the mob should be put down by any means necessary. And he was kind of relating that to the Rothbard, the cops should be unleashed thing. And Dave was actually saying like, well, with what we have right now, like, I think that's the best thing we can do. He said something along those lines, but he was just saying, he was thinking the cops should be unleashed as just like arresting people or something like that.
Right. And this goes back to, I mean, this is why we use the term paleo for them, because this is where the label comes from. In the early 90s, late 80s, Rothbard went on this kick, which, he called paleo libertarianism. And this 1992 essay is kind of the definitive statement of what it is. And it includes stuff like, the cops must be unleashed. This was around the time of the Rodney King riots, and Rockwell wrote a similarly notorious op-ed praising the cops about for beating Rodney King. And so, that kind of, there's a certain irony that issue kind of sort of fell out of salience for a long time, and now all of a sudden it's back with a vengeance. But yeah, that's the origin background of a lot of this. And speaking of downplaying the David Duke, if anybody wants to read this essay, I would go out and find the original PDF, because the version of it that's on Rockwell's website doesn't include the David Duke stuff that they went on for a page and a half at the start of it. That's as far as I'm concerned, these Fuentes and Molyneux and the rest of it are just kind of the contemporary equivalents of what David Duke was in 1992.
I noticed it was kind of hard to find the Lou Rockwell essay too, the pro police brutality one. It's kind of like you don't see it it's in like the corners of the internet. I don't know if they're trying to like downplay it or what, but it's really bad. It was basically saying like cops need to be able to beat people up to keep crime down. Like it was just straight up that.
Yeah, which and of course, this has the undertones to it of these things are not removed from the history of race and race's influence on how these events play out and all the rest of it. And you can talk about certainly, I don't know any libertarian that kind of that defends riots, that says it's a good thing when somebody goes and burns down their local gas station or grocery store and all the rest of it. Of course, that's awful. But on the other side of it, that is itself, this wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for the failure of the police to police themselves.
Right.
Not condoning it, but it is just a fact that when these things flare up like this, it is invariably because either the police actually did something horrible or something happened that played into their existing record of doing horrible things and never holding themselves accountable. And so for libertarians to look at this and say, well, the real problem is we just need to send in the army to crush the protests. I'm sorry, I'm not a Tiananmen Square libertarian, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, to me, by any means necessary means doing the reforms that are necessary to stop people from protesting. That's really the best mean necessary, because otherwise it just happens again and again and again and again. And I mean, this is not the first time this exact situation has caused protests and rioting, period. I mean, it seems to happen every 20 to 30 years, and nothing changes. So change something.
I think what Dave did, so he said a lot of dumb things that were kind of like retrospective. He was talking about things that happened in the past. But when he's actively making excuses for police brutality and the state, and he's supporting the state via these statements, I think that's unforgivable. That cannot be allowed to persist and keep going.
Right.
Well, when
You
I
know,
was
and it's
talking,
been,
oh, you go, Andy.
oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going
gonna
to say,
and
Nope.
it's gotten particularly sorry, it's gotten particularly disturbing recently as these things have gotten more violent, and you know what happened in Kenosha. And like, I'm not going to take a strong opinion on, you know, who was in the wrong that started the fight. The kid obviously should have never been there. But celebrating and praising these incidences of lethal political violence, um, I mean, that's a more than even saying things about race and gays and Jews and whatever. When you're on the side that sees that kind of thing and jumps in on one side or the other to celebrate your guy getting in a kill on somebody in the streets, um, that's a dark place for this country to be heading. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
aside from my libertarianism, um, we all need. I feel very strongly about this as somebody who's been in politics and done a lot of political messaging. Um, that when you do that, and when you particularly have a large audience that you're speaking to, and you're playing in a very real sense with people's hopes and emotions and fears, you have an obligation to not let this kind of virus spread, and not to fuel it, and to be mindful of, no matter what opinions you are, you don't want somebody who gets so wound up and is crazy and goes out and kills somebody over it. I mean, it reminds me depressingly of what kind of started to happen in the 90s with the militia movement, um, where there was some real outrageous things. I mean, God knows Waco and Ruby Ridge, those were horrible government offenses. And then the whole cosplay Civil War LARPing aspect of it took off, and it was fringe, but it overlapped and pulled from pools of support in mainstream politics. And eventually, what broke that fever was Oklahoma City. And I really hope we're not heading for something that catastrophic again, but we have seen a not insubstantial number of people killed in these sort of clashes in the streets between, I mean, yeah, it is often nutty left wingers. Sometimes it's not nutty left wingers, and it's more mainstream protest about Black Lives Matter and the rest of it. It's a mixed bag there. And then the confrontation between them and, you know, Proud Boys or Patriot Prayer, or, you know, whatever you want to call it. I mean, this is the same sort of militia movement crap, but, you know, updated to the era of internet memes. And
it's funny that
that's,
you
yeah.
bring up Proud Boys, because in one of those clips earlier, Dave was praising Gavin McGinnis, the founder of the Proud Boys. It
Yeah.
kind of plays into it. Just wanted to add that little thing there.
Who is somebody who himself was, I mean, I don't know if he would ever quite say he was a libertarian. I'm not sure if he did, but he certainly was somebody that kind of came from and had a lot of libertarian audience. To a lesser degree was he in the movement than some of the others, but um, and that's, you know, where it spun off and where that went. So yeah, I mean, this is not ha ha joke around mess with it stuff. When you're talking about groups and organizations that push people down this path that eventually leads some number of them to do horrible things.
So I've got another question about someone we haven't done yet. Fun person to bring up. So if you were running a libertarian organization, would you give Gary North an award?
I don't know how close I could get to him without him throwing a rock.
I mean, that's true. We've touched on him a lot, and he's just some of his writings are just out there.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll say about you know, kind of the whole thing with the Mises Caucus and Josh Smith and whatnot. I know Josh came on your show, and he talked about Gary North, and he said, "Yeah, no, of course I don't believe. I mean, Gary North is a like Saudi Arabia theater, like, you know, stone people in the streets for blasphemy, kind of
Like,
like
actually.
sincere, yeah, like dead serious, sincere." And he's somebody, you know, that hangs around with that whole world. He's the one of Tom Woods' co-authors. He's been at the Mises Institute.
Only guy he pays to listen to.
Or
Yeah.
Wood said he was the only guy he pays to read, and he called him the master.
Master, yeah.
Which,
And then writes a
know, I
homeschool
mean,
curriculum with them.
Oh yeah, he was
I don't
on
even know
the.
what more you can say to that. I mean, I would recommend if anybody, you might have mentioned this before, but Walter Olson wrote in Reason in 1998, kind of a good definitive takedown of Gary North's. The headline on it is "Invitation to a Stoning."
Yeah, I've read that before.
Yeah. So that's what I would recommend anybody to go to look at that to kind of get the context.
Although Gary North,
yeah.
I'll say, although Gary North doesn't believe in cultural Marxism, he doesn't think that's a thing. So, broken clocks, I suppose.
But speaking of when Josh came on when talked about Gary North, did you know Dave got really angry about that, and he basically like unendorsed Josh for chair? He was like he was mad that he was like talking shit about Gary North, like right. Gary North is someone we need to defend at all costs.
Right. He's like not. I mean, as loony out there as he is, like there's certainly a degree of separation removed from anything involved with the LP, and I think that speaks to, I mean, something you experienced, John, and I know you've written about why you left the Mises Caucus, which is that, I mean, there is a push in this direction that I do think there are people who don't want it to believe that. I mean, I believe Josh when he says, as much as I don't think he would be a good chair, I mean, I believe him when he says that, like, I don't buy into that sort of stuff. I'm not alt-right or whatever. We don't, but then when you look at the direction it's going and what'll get you booted out of the caucus versus what they welcome and embrace, it's gotten, I mean, it's worse than any of the things you could find. Kind of even Smith, as out there as he is, Dave Smith, I mean, it's not, they embrace and have in their their comments and their discussions, all the rest of it, people that go a lot further, and it's not considered a problem. And you've done this, I don't know how many times. You've grabbed the screenshot.
It's always just one bad guy or something like that, but it's over and over and over.
Funny enough, I never had this problem with Gary Johnson.
There was a guy a few days ago who was saying he was like playing off of Dave's thing about ending the mob must be put down by any means necessary, and he was saying like we need to go further than that, and the police should be putting people in body bags. And I made a post about like if the Mises Caucus will condemn that or kick the guy or what. And Heist responded like saying like if you want someone kicked, like this isn't the way to go about it. You guys have no credibility, and we make our own decisions and stuff like that. And he's still in there.
Right.
So that's apparently not an issue to say that the police should be out putting people in body bags.
And then like the next day he went on to make homophobic remarks or something like that, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah. He was actually in Dave Smith's group. He was talking about the debate with you, Andy, and he used not Heist, the other guy, the guy who should have been kicked. He used a homophobic slur talking about you. So.
Oh, that's the thing. I mean, I joked on Facebook the other day, and it's true. I always know one of my posts has been shared to their group because I get rando commenters calling me a faggot. And I mentioned this sort of thing, and they wanted to, Dave wanted to spin it as, oh, you're complaining about people being mean on the internet or whatever, that you get random trolls or whatever. But no, this is not normal. This is not the kind of thing that follows in the wake of any most libertarians who have an audience. I mean, when this is your base, when these are the people who follow you around and attack your enemies, and they're all blowing it up with that sort of like frat bro, puerile, edgelord, own the libsism, all, and that sort of thing. That's a choice. That's the people you've chosen to cater to. That doesn't come out of
Why are you bringing these people to your audience, Dave? It's not occurring in a vacuum. There's a reason they're coming. And
I've noticed. So Dave does live streams of his new episodes on YouTube, like a couple times a week or something like that. So there's always like a chat. So I went in there with the Fakertarians account once, and I don't know if they didn't know who I was or what, but I was like, "Oh, any Nick Fuentes fans here?" And there's all like, "Yeah, we love Nick." Like there was like a bunch of it. So there's a lot of overlap there, and you wouldn't think that with like a normal libertarian or something like that.
Right. And I don't know where it comes, I don't know if, necessarily Dave's bringing them in, but like when, he has people like Fuentes on his show, they stick around. Dave's definitely not doing anything that makes him scared, to be around.
I think Dave knows what he's doing there. I think he's purposely trying to appeal to those people because it's more about the dollars at the end of the day than principle.
Yeah. Who will get him more subscribers?
Yeah,
So
you can build a podcast audience on this stuff, but you can't win an election on it.
Speaking about my time in the Mises Caucus, for anyone who doesn't know, I was a member pretty soon after it started. I was a moderator in there for over a year. I was invited to like the online leadership meetings and all that stuff. I definitely noticed when Dave Smith started doing a lot of recruiting, it's just the frog people over and over and over. Like I just noticed like there were always some of them there, but it was just a gigantic influx of these types of people.
Yeah. I mean, it's frog people we all know the type. If you've been on the internet in the past 5 years, you know the type, and it is. I don't know what the degree. This is sincere belief that this is the proper political coalition for us to build to reduce the state, versus just cynical pandering to an audience. Because being kind of a third string alt-right audience can still get you a bigger audience than a lot of libertarian. If you were doing just pure libertarian for libertarian audiences. So I don't know. It's interesting, and I it's probably a mix of both. I mean, that's how these things go. Is that usually it's some mix of self-interest and true believer.
Yeah, I found it kind of interesting that two of the people that we've highlighted from the Fakertarians page, that the Mises Caucus and Michael Heiss especially, were very reluctant to kick. They actually ended up. Well, the first one, I'll tell this story for anyone who hasn't heard it. There's a guy. I'll just refer to him as JM because his name's already out there enough. I don't need to give him press or something like that. He was going around saying Europe is for Europeans and how libertarians need to do more about race as it relates to, I think it was crime, social cohesion, and IQ. And he was also talking about how he wanted all immigration to the US banned. And I brought up in talking in the Mises Caucus group, I think this is the day I left. Like right before I left, like that earlier that day, I was talking about how I was noticing an issue with alt-righters, and Heiss is like, name one. And I named this guy. And he pops up in the thread. Heiss is there arguing with me, and Heiss is saying, oh, he just has a different cultural preference. And I made a post about him. He doubled down on the cultural preference thing. And then a few days later, we find some screenshots of him in Dave Smith group ranting about how the Jews run the world and stuff like that. So that he ended up getting kicked then. And then there was another guy too, Emo Hoppy, and I don't even need to go into detail about him, but I found it kind of interesting that both JM and Emo Hoppian, they both claim to be donors to the Mises Caucus, and there was a lot of reluctance to kick them. So I think that self-interest thing, I brought it up to Heiss once, and he was like, oh, I didn't even know they were donors. But I think the self-interest thing definitely plays into it, like about the quantity over quality kind of thing they're going in with bringing in new people.
He needs to make the caucus his job. So, it's not when he has to give up that money.
I think he's talked about that, wanting to do activism full-time kind of thing. And I think that's kind of
that $400 a month he's already pulling down from it money.
You've looked at the FEC filings too.
Somebody pointed it out to me. Yeah.
Okay. Anything else we want to get to?
Brian Lee is asking how he can get a shirt of ours. Do you want to give the link?
What is it? Shop. Let me
shop.
see.
Yeah, you know better.
Red shirt. I'm typing it in now.
Shop.spreadshirt.com/fake. So that's how you can get that. So
because someone
Is there
stole
anything
Fakertarians.
Yeah. Is there anything else we want to get to today? I mean, what's your take on the Mises Caucus in general? Just because I meant to ask that. I know we already kind of talked about them a bit, but
I think I have never said, and this is something that brought up, that it's a broad brushstroke of all evil people who are all nasty, evil racists, and all the rest of it. I think there's a lot of people who believe in wanting a more principled libertarian message, and I understand that, and they want focus on some economic issues, and they believe in Austrian economics, and that's all great. But when you fly the banner of Mises, which is deeply unfortunate because, of course, this does not at all have anything to do with the real Ludwig von Mises, but what that brand has come to accumulate and the baggage it's come to get over the years, I mean, when that's how you're staking yourself out and branding yourself, I don't know how much moderating they could do to keep that stuff out. It's just very inextricably associated with it, and that's the history behind it. Why a lot of libertarians, no, we don't look at kind of late Rothbard and figure and think that's what we want for the party and that's the messaging. And then on top of it, you have stuff like Dave Smith tweeting, the Mises Caucus is going to take over the party, and all the others are fake pussy ass bitches, or something to that effect.
yeah.
So it's like, I mean, this is why they show up, and I see this at state conventions and at the national convention, and they, at best lose 2-1. You all suck, and we're going to take over and kick you out because you're a bunch of, limp-wristed, pansy social justice warriors or whatever, is not a message that makes many friends or wins elections among the people who've been in the party and been through its ups and downs and know the history. In the way that a lot of libertarians do. I mean, these are people who are have been around for a while in the movement. They didn't come into it in the past few years, or even with Ron Paul or Gary Johnson or anything like that. There's a base of institutional knowledge there that reflects why these things aren't, why there's pushback against all this sort of stuff. But absolutely, there are people in the Mises Caucus who go and run for office, who help the party, who volunteer to do things, and there's a lot of them are good people who I have no desire to purge or kick out or ban from the party or anything like that. I think the leadership has served them very poorly. In part because it's irreplaceable, self-appointed for life leadership, which doesn't help have healthy feedback incentives. And so I would say to them, I mean, if what you want is to run on a message for local office or for whatever office you want to choose for, and you want to talk about more free market issues, or you want to be more radical, or you want to talk about Austrian economics, there's, in near as I know, nobody in the Libertarian Party who has a problem with any of that. All it leaves is this kind of divisive. It gets to be cultish, frankly. It's us versus the enemy. We're going to have to take over and purge all the rest of them, and it's certainly not. It's not the approach we've taken in the pragmatic caucus, which, if we want, we can touch a little bit on what that is. And it's not the anti-Mises or anti-radical. But I mean, I think there's potential for a lot of healthy working together and stuff. But if I do believe at the end of the day, there's a lot of problems with what they're talking about and what they're pushing and the kind of stuff they bring into the party. So I probably won't vote for whoever some of the people they've endorsed and run for internal party office and that sort of thing. I mean, that's the extent of it.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of that because they just turn a lot of people off. Like, even if they have like a third, like the rest of the party is just like, no, we don't want anything to do with this.
I mean, a good example of that. I mean, Jacob Hornberger is not nearly so bad on a lot of this stuff. No. I don't think he's really. I mean, I disagree with him on some things. I don't think he's too awful on a lot of this stuff, though. But because he was seen as their candidate, you know what happened? He got a quarter of the vote on the first ballot, and he got a quarter of the vote on the last ballot.
Yeah, an otherwise pretty decent candidate by libertarian standards because he was associated with them.
It really hurt him.
Lost.
And I think they knew it hurt him. Actually, some of the folks who were running his campaign, who I know, I think they were aware of it and tried to get out from under that. But it really couldn't be, and that was their main base of support, and it was so divided and all the rest of it. Then when he went after Amash, I think that also kind of put that hard ceiling on his base of support. But this is the pattern I see over and over again. I see at state conventions that they'll show up and they'll get some of the, they'll get a couple of the last ranked, or they'll get alternate delegate seats to the national convention. They've been crowded out a lot in these delegate races by people who've been around in the party longer and don't have this association that turns so many people off. And, that's our internal democratic governance structure at work.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself. But so one of the commenters just said he wants to hear a little bit from you about the Pragmatic Caucus. And I'm a radical myself. Not the Radical Caucus, but a radical. So
Sure.
give me your pitch.
Sure. I mean, I get along with lots of radicals. I'll start off with that. The Pragmatic Caucus is not an ideological caucus. It's not about discussing it's not about what's the good platform things. It's not anti-radical. It's not moderate or centrism. The Pragmatic Caucus is about encouraging and building up libertarian parties' understanding and ability of how to win elections. What makes a viable candidate? What does it take to run a winning campaign? How do you pick a race to run in? And ensuring that the party is set up and built around that as its goal. And the example I use of this is what's been going on with the Frontier Project, where the party in the past couple of years has moved to make a dedicated effort at winning some winnable state legislative seats, which is a big thing. I mean, these are small seats. These are ones we can go in and have the resources and do what it takes in a small district. But that's the sort of thing we need more of, because that gets us that outgrows us out of this perpetual debate club mentality. I mean, it's a political party. The only fundamental different purpose it has from any other libertarian organization is to put candidates on the ballot and try to get them elected. And there's a lot of uphill climb about doing it as a third party. I have no delusions about that. It's hard to make a breakthrough and have a viable campaign as a libertarian candidate, but it's not impossible. We know what works. We know how you need to plan backwards from your win number, and how am I going to make that many touches with the voters? I'm going to do this many mailers. I'm going to have so many doors knocked by people. I'm going to focus on this message and this message and this message that I know appeals to voters where I'm running. And all those sorts of just basic nuts and bolts electioneering. That's the kind of thing we need more of in the party. And that's the kind of thing we want to encourage and focus on and build. And if you want to go, as long as you're not doing Holocaust denial videos or whatever, like within reason, you can go run on whatever message you want. Whatever you feel is the appropriate message in your race. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, when I ran for Secretary of State in Wisconsin, it's an office that had not even a full employee, had a half employee that he shared with somebody else. No powers, did not do hardly anything. The legislature over the years had stripped it all. Like running elections went off to some other board and all the rest of it. It was just this legacy office that had an incumbent who'd been in it for 40 years. A Democratic incumbent. The Republicans had always been
40 years.
Oh yeah, and he's still in office. Like Doug LaFollette is his name. A relation of fighting Bob LaFollette. And the Republicans had run on abolishing it before, and they weren't this time. They had a guy who was like, I want to take it over and run elections with it. And I've seen what Republican secretaries of state do when they can run elections. So I didn't want that. I think abolishing it was a good idea. I don't think partisan officials should be running elections. And so I ran on that, and I got like a few newspaper endorsements. People who knew this debate over the years and always been on the abolish the office side endorsed me. And I ended up getting 2.5%, and we needed 1% for ballot access. And so far as it matters, the Democrat won, and it still has no power and can't do anything. So that's an example of I'm not talking about, you don't have to necessarily run on some milk toast and incremental reforms or whatever. You can go out there with a whole hog radical kind of message, and more radical than that example even. But if voters never hear from you, it doesn't matter. Like that's kind of the point to this. Just throwing your name on the ballot doesn't actually get your message in front of very many people. You got to go do that yourself. And so I love that the Libertarian Party in recent years has moved to focusing more candidates run further down the ballot. More candidates run for city council and mayor and local state legislative seats. And, we still have to run some people for governor and senator and whatnot. That's partly to promote the party, and it's partly for ballot access. And that certainly serves its purpose. But speaking as a libertarian who's run for Congress, unless you have a very good strategic reason of why getting something far short of winning is a goal you want to hit, just don't do it. Run for something. Go run for something you can win. And Jeff Hewitt is a great example of this. Jeff Hewitt, in his little town in Southern California, first got appointed started going to the meetings and stuff. Got appointed to the planning board. Then he won a city council seat in this little Calamasa 5,000 people town. Then he was elected mayor. Then he had a big, fight with the labor union for the firefighters department, where he basically pulled them out, and it was a big thing, saved the town a lot of money. And now he got elected to the Riverside County Board in 2018. Nail biter of a race, but he got it. And that's a 5-member board in a county with 2.5 million people. I mean, it's got a
Nice.
$1 billion budget. And he's the swing vote with, I believe it's 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. I have to go. It might be 3-1 or something like that. But he's, one of 5. It's a very powerful. People leave the state legislature in California to get a county supervisor seat.
So do we have anything else we want to touch on before we wrap up here? Anybody else got any questions?
So yeah, I have a few issues with the Prague Caucus because I'm a radical, like the person that owns the stock account, John Hudak, and I'm a proud member of the Waffle House Caucus, by the way. And I think it's funny that the one thing that brings rads and prags together is the fucking idiocy of the LPMC. It just kind of brings everybody together. No, we do not support that. But I was interested, Andy, in I know you're a pragmatist, but philosophically, would you describe yourself as an anarchist, a minarchist, a constitutionalist? Philosophically, is there any leader in libertarian thought that you would kind of identify with?
I like Hayek a lot. That's probably the one I would most identify with. I'm not an anarchist. I would call myself a minarchist. That's a fair description. I read and am still informed a lot by what I read from Rothbard and Friedman and Ayn Rand and Mises. I mean, the list of kind of the big libertarian theorists. But the one I definitely most identify with is Hayek, because he had insights that I think libertarians too often undervalue and don't emphasize enough about the nature of emergent order. And the kind of, he had some different emphases in the sort of the importance of incentives and public choice theory and all the things that came out of that. A lot of that goes back to Hayek. So I think that is a broader kind of richer tradition libertarians need to understand. You should read Rothbard, but you shouldn't stop there.
It's fair enough. So, can you throw that comment back up? So let me read this out just in case anyone listens to this, not on YouTube. So it says, out of curiosity, Andy, why do you feel that when we do polling, if we don't mention party, LP candidates get around 10 to 12% of the vote, but the second we mention party, they drop to 2.5 to 4.5%? This is a North Dakota specific example, but it's something we saw in 2016. I don't personally know much about that, but I was curious if you had any kind of answer to it.
Oh, yeah, no, I do have some thoughts on this, and that is a good point. Absolutely, the party label hurts us on the ballot. Nonpartisan elections are more winnable for us for that reason, where the party label is not on the ballot. A party, when you're running in a partisan election that has the party label like that, it's bringing your baseline vote to the table, and that's not too much for us. We can get a few percent, but for most people are like, well, I'm not a libertarian, I'm a Republican or a Democrat. And so it makes it much harder to win partisan elections. And if it was up to me, I would take party labels off the ballot entirely. And that's something I would say any state party in the LP should support if it comes up as an option in the legislature or as a, something that you can do as a ballot initiative. The example that I come to all the time was in 2018, Laura Ebke's race. She was a member of the unicameral Nebraska state legislature, where it's the only state legislature with nonpartisan elections. Everybody knows everybody's party affiliation, but still, it's not on the ballot. And she had switched, and she ended up getting it was a hard fought race. I went and knocked doors for it and whatnot. She ended up losing with like 44%. But if that had been a partisan election, and we've seen in other states when incumbents switch parties and then try to run for re-election as libertarians, it's just killer. It's still, even to get to a three-way kind of 34% plurality, eking that out, I think it would have been hard for Justin Amash to do, and he's incredibly popular in his district, and has been always had a lot of support and fended off primary challenges and the rest of it. But particularly in a state that literally has straight ticket voting, where it's like you can pick a box at the top of the ballot. That too particularly made it worse for him. So I do think libertarians need to consider electoral reform, things like nonpartisan elections, but also ranked choice voting. My kind of dream scenario is we get proportional represent. If you're going to have a partisan election, I would like it to be like a proportional representation for the state legislature. And this is, not crazy stuff. A lot of other countries have used these systems for a long time, and it works better, and it doesn't lead to the toxic, death spiral of red versus blue tribalism that we get. That largely does go back to our electoral system. And so even though I think the Libertarian Party and third parties serve a place within that kind of system, you absolutely need sort of broader fundamental change to the rules of how elections work in this country to really break up the duopoly and have a multi-party system that I think would serve us so much better, even aside from, I think it would get libertarian ideas at the table more effectively. I think it would go a long way to getting out of this god awful situation we've gotten into in this country, where it's just a constant struggle to the death over who's going to get 50% plus one in the next election. So yeah, that's kind of my long answer, bringing it around to electoral reform. But absolutely, if you're running in a race where you have the Libertarian Party ballot label, it hurts, and you're going to have to find ways to both improve voters' perception of the party, which is part of what we've done in states like Wyoming, that kind of are naturally more libertarian leaning. It's certainly easier, but it takes building a brand and a reputation that at the very least doesn't turn people off. So that's kind of there's no short, easy answer. The best thing you can do to overcome it in a local or state race like that is have somebody that's actually directly known to the voter, somebody that's known in their community, that has direct personal interaction with the voters. That's the best anecdote to kind of counteract that that problem, I would say.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So, unless anyone has does anyone have any follow-up questions or anything?
Yep. Actually, same person. Follow-up question: would it be better spending on those sorts of ballot initiatives than perpetual ballot access issues?
Definitely. That's something I want the party to do. And I think I remember looking at North Dakota might be one of our better states to kind of try I know they have, there's been I don't recall all the details. I know there's some kind of electoral reform ballot initiative going on there. But absolutely, this is the kind of thing libertarians can do. We might not have a ton of voters, but we've got the deepest well of petitioning capacity in the country. Because we go through this every 4 years of having to do, organize all these drives. Which, quick shout out, we're almost done. We almost made it to all 50 states plus DC again. Rhode Island's the last one they're verifying right now. So all the people who did that, great job. But it's absolutely true that ballot initiatives in general are good for the Libertarian Party to support, not just electoral reform is one of the, I think, definitely should be in the mix. But the LP in Colorado was part of the coalition that did the legalization initiative there. There's good stuff that can be done through the ballot initiative process, and that gets you out of it. Bypass. That's the whole brilliant thing about it is, for better and for worse, you bypass all the Republicans and Democrats in the state legislature. I see. Oh, North Dakota's got sued off the ballot, the electoral reform. Well, that's unfortunate.
That's a bummer.
It is. It is. So I know it's in Maine, and there's fights over ranked choice in Massachusetts. So there's already some momentum and interest in this whole thing going on, and organizations that are doing it. And I would encourage libertarians to reach out to and work with them and offer kind of to work together on some of these things.
Nice. So
It's kind of sucks in Minnesota we don't have the ballot initiatives and stuff like other states do. Or it's pretty much the only thing that goes to direct election is constitutional amendments.
Yeah, that was the same problem we had in Wisconsin. I was there in the Wisconsin party for years. There's all sorts of things. God, I wish I could do a ballot initiative for that thing there. So yeah, it's something like a little bit over half the states have it as an option.
So we really appreciate you coming on today, Andy. It was a good time. Do you have anything else you'd like to say before we conclude?
No, I think it was a pretty good conversation that covers a lot of the stuff. I really this was a somewhat strange experience of I demand you debate me for citing all these things I've said. I don't think that would pass as a acceptable proposition at the Oxford Union, but you did a good job. I had some of the same quotes in front of me and a lot of the clips in mind, and the back and forth mush. I didn't cite at full length all of them and read them like some of these clips you played. So I appreciate that, and it was a good conversation. And I just want to say I appreciate the stance you've taken on this stuff.
Thank you.
You're proof to me that there are people who see this stuff and it gets to a point where they'll draw a line, and that makes it worth pushing back on.
Yeah, I know there are people in there right now that I've had conversations with too. So there's some others who are coming around. But for anyone who didn't hear earlier, Andy did a debate with Dave Smith, and it's going to be public on Monday. So it'll be on Lions of Liberty for anyone. So I think that about concludes our show. Thanks again to Andy for coming on, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks.
Later.